Bonjour tout le monde. On est au courant du jugement. On l'a discuté avec le Premier ministre, avec les fonctionnaires, les experts, avec nos collègues du cabinet. On respecte complètement le système indépendant judiciaire du Canada, mais avec tout le respect, on n'est pas d'accord avec cette décision et on va aller en appel. Je veux juste vous rappeler aux tout Canadiens et Canadiennes que c'était un moment précaire, un moment dangereux pour le Canada. La sécurité publique était menacée, la sécurité nationale, qui inclut la sécurité nationale économique, était menacée. On a pris une décision difficile. On a pris une décision sérieuse, une décision grave, mais on a été convaincus au moment qu'on a pris la bonne décision. On continue aujourd'hui d'être convaincus qu'on a pris la bonne décision. So we are aware of the court decision. We have discussed it with the Prime Minister, with cabinet colleagues, with senior federal government officials and experts. We respect very much Canada's independent judiciary. However, we do not agree with this decision, and respectfully, we will be appealing it. I would just like to take a moment to remind Canadians of how serious the situation was in our country when we took that decision. The public safety of Canadians was under threat. Our national security, which includes our national economic security, was under threat. It was a hard decision to take. We took it very seriously after a lot of hard work, after a lot of careful deliberation. We were convinced at the time, I was convinced at the time, it was the right thing to do. It was the necessary thing to do. I remain, and we remain, convinced of that. And I'll now turn it over to my colleague, the Minister of Justice, and then we'll hear from my colleague, the Minister of Public Safety. Arif, over to you.
Thank you. Thank you, Chrystia. Just to build on what Minister Freeland was mentioning, the court decision, we've received the judgment. We've done a preliminary review of the judgment. The judgment finds, in certain respects, that the decisions of the government were valid and were within constitutional parameters. In other respects, it finds it was not. Upon reviewing that decision, we obviously reiterate the respect for the judicial process that Minister Freeland has just mentioned, but a fundamental aspect of the judicial process is also proceeding on an appeal. And after that consultation with the Prime Minister, with cabinet colleagues, we've taken the decision that we will be proceeding on an appeal, as is within our rights within the judicial system. Donc, c'est-à-dire qu'effectivement, on a reçu le jugement, on a fait une revue préliminaire du raisonnement de la juge du cour fédéral. Il a décidé que, de quelque façon, la décision prise par le gouvernement du Canada était correcte et a suivi les paramètres constitutionnels, mais en d'autres façons, il n'était pas d'accord avec notre décision qu'il a décrit comme déraisonnable et hors de la Constitution. On a beaucoup de respect pour le système judiciaire et pour ce jugement-là, mais avec notre système judiciaire, ça inclut, et c'est un principe assez important, le fait et l'option de procéder en appel. Après une discussion avec le Premier ministre, avec les autres collègues du cabinet, avec mes deux collègues ici, on a décidé de procéder en appel parce qu'on n'est pas en accord avec la décision. Et pour souligner où on était il y a 2 ans, j'aimerais juste donner la parole à Monsieur le ministre Dominic LeBlanc. So I'll turn to Minister LeBlanc to just outline where we were 2 years ago when the significant decision to protect Canadians was taken by the Government of Canada. Dominic?
Alors, merci, Arif. Je pense, comme la vice-première ministre a bien dit, il faut se rappeler le contexte il y a presque 2 ans aujourd'hui. Moi, j'ai assisté à ces rencontres du Conseil des ministres avec mes collègues. On se rappelle très bien le contexte à Ottawa. Il y avait la capitale d'un pays du G7 qui était effectivement paralysée. On se rappelle des inquiétudes au pont à Windsor, en Ontario, des emplois qui ont été perdus dans le secteur manufacturier. On se rappelle de nos discussions avec l'administration américaine quant à la sécurité nationale et économique qui était menacée. Et moi, je me rappelle très bien quand les services de renseignement et de police nous ont informés qu'à Coutts, en Alberta, ils avaient découvert 2 bombes artisanales, 36 000 balles, munitions, et en même temps, ils ont déposé des accusations aussi sérieuses que complot pour meurtre. Alors, c'était le contexte. Le gouvernement avait des renseignements à l'époque, et je vous rappelle aussi, le directeur du service de renseignement, M. David Vigneault, avait appuyé la décision du gouvernement. Je vous rappelle que la Chambre des communes a voté pour ratifier la décision de proclamer la loi sur les mesures d'urgence. Et je vous rappelle encore que le gouvernement de l'Ontario a aussi appuyé la décision du cabinet. Alors, comme mes collègues ont dit, le système judiciaire comprend des niveaux d'appel. On va s'en servir parce que nous ne sommes pas d'accord. Mais je pense que c'est important de considérer le contexte de sécurité nationale et publique qui existait au moment où le gouvernement a pris la décision. So, just to add to what my colleague said, I think it's important to remember the context almost 2 years ago today, those weeks in late January and February 2 years ago, the public safety and the national security context. I was in Ottawa during those weeks, as were my colleagues. I participated in the cabinet discussions. We were updated by senior officials about the risks of copycat incidents at other border crossings. I spoke to premiers from British Columbia to Nova Scotia about risks to their community safety. We saw border crossings and the damage to the Canadian economy, thousands of jobs put at risk. We spoke with the Premier of Ontario and the Government of Ontario that supported the invocation of the Emergencies Act 2 years ago. I think that's an important moment. I think it's also important to consider the government was given information with respect to the disruption at the border crossing in Coutts, Alberta. It's not banal when the security services tell you that they found 2 pipe bombs and 36,000 rounds of munition and ended up laying criminal charges as serious as conspiracy to commit murder and assaulting peace officers. So the context is important. I think it's also important to note that the House of Commons ratified the decision to invoke. But as my colleague said, the judicial system also includes appeal mechanisms, and the government's made that decision. But I certainly, as a minister who participated in those discussions and who spoke to premiers across the country, am very satisfied that we made a reasonable decision. And will now let the appeal courts consider the filings from my colleagues.
If I could just add one thing in terms of the judicial decision that was rendered today, we also know that a member of the Court of Appeal, Justice Rouleau, conducted a very public, comprehensive and transparent investigation into the reasonableness of the government's decision. That decision stands at odds with the decision that was rendered today. I think that is important, and that also informs our decision and our basis upon which we will proceed to an appeal. Donc, j'aimerais juste le répéter en français. Donc, c'est-à-dire que il faut souligner aussi qu'une juge de cour d'appel d'Ontario, Monsieur le juge Rouleau, a fait une enquête assez transparente, assez compréhensive vis-à-vis la situation et la décision qui a été prise par le gouvernement du Canada, il a décidé, il a fait une conclusion qui est différente de celui qui a été reçu aujourd'hui par la Cour fédérale. Donc, ça informe notre décision de procéder en appel. Merci.
The decision seems to single out some of your choices on freezing bank accounts and credit cards as being part of the reason where it's unreasonable in terms of the measures taken by the government. You defended those when you announced them at the time. Do you have any regrets on taking that measure in the light of this decision? Would you have done it differently based on what we've seen from the federal court today?
As I said in my opening remarks, we faced, as a country and as a government, an incredibly serious threat. A threat to the public safety of many Canadians, a threat to our national security, including our national economic security. We acted to secure and protect Canada and to secure and protect the national interest. It was not an easy time. These were not easy decisions. In making our decisions and choosing to act, we worked very, very hard with all levels of government, and we were very mindful of acting in such a way that the safety, the physical safety of all Canadians involved would be preserved. I don't want to minimize the gravity of the actions we took. Neither do I want to minimize the gravity of the threat Canada faced. And to your question, I was certain, after a lot of deliberation with colleagues and many others, that we took the right decision. I was certain at the time. I was certain when I testified before Rouleau, and I remain certain today. Thank you.
Regrettez-vous quoi que ce soit à ce sujet-là? Avez-vous un quelconque regret?
Je suis triste qu'on a eu cette situation au Canada. Vraiment. Très, très triste. Mais on a eu cette situation. On a eu une grave, grave menace à la sécurité nationale, à la sécurité publique des citoyens, à la sécurité nationale économique, qui est aussi très importante. Et je veux vous rappeler quelle était la situation. Quelle était la menace à ce moment-là? C'était, comme Dom a juste nous rappelé, c'était il y a 2 ans. C'était quelques semaines avant l'invasion de l'Ukraine de la Russie. C'était un moment quand la démocratie et l'ordre international étaient très, très menacés. Et on a eu cette menace qui était réelle. Et c'était une menace à la sécurité économique nationale. Alors, je ne veux pas, vraiment, sincèrement, je ne veux pas minimiser comment c'était une décision lourde pour nous, une décision grave pour nous prendre. On l'a pris très au sérieux. On a compris que c'était une grande chose à faire. Mais au moment qu'on était là, qu'on a vu vraiment la menace très, très sérieuse, on a été convaincus que c'était la bonne décision, que c'était la décision nécessaire pour le Canada. J'étais convaincue au moment. J'ai expliqué, comme a expliqué le Premier ministre, comme a expliqué le ministre LeBlanc, les autres ministres, en public, pendant quelques heures, le justice Rouleau. Et aujourd'hui, je continue d'être convaincue qu'on a fait la bonne chose.
Serious threats.
The court didn't just take issue with the fact that you acted, it took issue with how you acted and how you wrote the regulations you did, including in that PCO memo, there's a warning that the decisions you're taking and how you're writing them were open to constitutional challenge. Looking back, was there a necessary steps you had to take to minimize the constitutional impact of these regulations? And did you do a good job of respecting Canadian civil liberties in writing those regulations? Last question.
Look, I truly do not want to minimize the fact that we took these decisions with a heavy heart. This was not a situation we wanted to find ourselves in, and these were not actions we took with any satisfaction or relish. This was, however, and I want people to remember that, an extremely tense time. The safety of individual Canadians was under real threat, as Minister LeBlanc has pointed out. Our national security was under real threat, our national security including our economic security. That was the reality of that moment. We explored many, many avenues to bring this to an end. This was an option of the last resort. We believed at the time that it was absolutely necessary for us to act, and for us to act in a way that minimized the physical danger to all Canadians. That was really important to us. We believed we were doing something necessary and something legal at the time. That was our belief then. That was our belief as we testified at length to Chief Justice Rouleau. That continues to be my belief today. As our Minister of Justice has said, we will, confident in that belief, be appealing this decision. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Merci.